Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for some more to join, and we'll get started in about a minute. All right. We're just waiting for a few more to join, and then we'll start for those who have just joined. We're excited to present to you guys today. We had a lot of fun with this one, so we hope you enjoy it as much as we're going to enjoy presenting it. All right. Why don't we get started? It's 2 minutes in. Right.
All right, sounds great. So welcome everybody to Elevating MedTech Campaigns. We're going to help make your campaigns think like your top sales folks. So let's jump right in.
So my name is Kathy Grandes. I'm VP of Marketing Strategy and Planning here at Shift. I have a lot of omni-channel experience, and especially in the healthcare and medtech space. So I've worked with clients like WSA Audiology, Zoetis, McKesson, GSK, Moderna, to name a few. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about all things email, and I will pass it over to Tori.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Tori. I'm on the Marketing Strategy and Planning team here at Shift. Before working in marketing, I worked at an investment fund where one of our focus areas was biotech. Since joining Shift, I've had the chance to work with some amazing healthcare companies like CSL and Embecta. So excited to jump in today. So here at Shift, we have supported a lot of healthcare clients in leveling up their marketing efforts, including Moderna, BD, ResMed. ResMed we'll dig into a little more later, but all of these great logos we've helped support their marketing efforts. So today, and you can tell that we had some fun with this, today we are going to start with your vitals. We're going to take a look at what's going on in the healthcare space. We'll diagnose some common issues that we see with campaigns for healthcare companies. We will lay out your treatment options for how to start getting better. We're going to run through a case study, and then we will write you a prescription on some quick wins, what you can start doing today to get better. And then we'll wrap up and have some time for questions. So if you think of questions as we go, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll circle back to them at the end. And I want to encourage everybody to please chime in. We want to make sure that this time is really valuable for everybody here. So if you have questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat.
And Tori and I were joking that we should have been wearing like doctor lab coats because we feel like doctors of email presenting this because we had a little fun with the agenda. So hopefully you enjoyed as much as we did.
All right, so let's talk about our vitals. Let's talk about what the healthcare industry looks like today. So I am sure that I'm preaching to the choir when I say that healthcare looks a lot different than it did 6 years ago. Everything has sort of been flipped on its head, but when we're talking about marketing, there are some specific pressures that have had a big impact on the way that we're communicating. So virtual and telehealth adoption has gone way up, and patient expectations are to have really high quality online experiences. And in that same vein, providers are feeling a lot of pressure to be providing those great experiences. Patient experience and trust is top of mind across the industry at large. 65% of healthcare consumers expect a more convenient experience, and providers are looking for ways to improve upon and enhance that as well. And we also know that costs are rising. So providers through that are being asked to justify and explain treatments. This all means that the way that we communicate about medtech has to answer to how we're fitting into these changes. So it also gives us the opportunity, though, to support providers in advocating for their products and their patient needs. So we're adding value for providers, we're making their lives a little bit easier, and we're helping get products to the patients that really need them. So in addition to just the way that people engage, the healthcare market is also changing a lot. COVID slowed down healthcare spending. We saw a lot less benefit usage, but in 2028 projections, we show that space sort of heating back up as people go back to their sort of normal healthcare routines. We especially expect to see a lot of growth in the product, pharma, and biotech spaces, which means that there should be fresh market share to grab as people are sort of returning to their routines again. We're also seeing a lot of activity from non-traditional pharmacies as compounding pharmacies grow with the GLP-1 market growing so quickly. We see that patients are more comfortable engaging online with pharmacies and providers, but also health information generally. Additionally, the population is aging, so we expect to see more government payers and more non-hospital, non-acute provider growth. So not only are we seeing market share opportunity, but there are new and evolving care paths that we're seeing that really haven't been marketed to, at least not in a sort of contemporary sense. So that is a great opportunity for us if we start now to really get out in front of all of that. At a high level, when we are talking about healthcare marketing and why it is so challenging, there's really three main pieces. So first of all, engaging with healthcare providers is just really hard. They are frequently part of complex organizations. There's a lot of titles with different needs to manage. They have different procurement processes, and there's a lot of variability there. In addition to that, we're also trying to manage all of the pressures that they're feeling externally. So economic factors, supply chain, trust, and then just hospital budgets, right? Next up, we have to manage technology, platforms, and data. So we often have relatively poor visibility into metrics. We see technology not being fully utilized frequently, and the data is not flowing from sales to marketing and vice versa. So we see companies investing in these great tech tools and platforms, but figuring out how to make use of all the bells and whistles, or even which of those bells and whistles are the right ones, are really tough to do. We also see in larger organizations that often these platforms are owned by IT, so they're not necessarily set up with marketing in mind, which makes enablement really difficult. Finally, the cherry on top, of course, is that we are dealing with the added complexity from regulatory compliance and just the general complexity of the product that we're selling. These are big, meaty products that we have to figure out how to explain to folks. So the industry at large is really sort of actively leveraging technology, data, and analytics to enhance their customer journey and experiences. So these are a handful of examples. We see Boston Scientific and Omnicell are creating these libraries of personalized, self-serve, really easy to access content for their providers. Similarly, we're seeing Pfizer giving HCPs access to prescribing info, clinical trials, sampling, copay cards, tons of info that is really easily accessible on the web and on mobile, which is really important. What's sort of in common about all of these things is the use of data to understand their customers' needs, and then the use of technology to create a great omni-channel experience. So it sort of builds this feedback loop of learning what their consumers want and then building it into this really elegant, beautiful product. And it sort of loops back and forth that way.
Yeah, and it really helps to understand how all the other organizations are focusing on and taking a look at what their tactics are so you can kind of start to strategize and plan a longer term approach, which we will get into further down the line within this webinar.
All right. So you have these campaigns, you've worked really hard to set them up, but they are still not really performing how you want. What gives? What's the deal here? So in the med tech space, we see a lot of the same issues with marketing campaigns over and over. We see teams working really hard to put together a campaign. They're putting in a ton of effort, making sure they have all the right assets and making it look beautiful, and then they never touch it again. So it becomes this big campaign that's kind of running in the background, but it's not really serving you and it's not really moving the needle. And it just becomes kind of a frustration that way. Marketing campaigns, we have to start thinking about them as tools to be honed over time. So it's not a hammer, it is a set of drill bits. We have to change things out and pick the right things for the outcome that we want and for the work that we're trying to do. We also see a lot of campaigns that are really overly broad. So marketers are trying to fit all of the relevant information to anyone that could need it all at once. And that leaves most messaging really broad in terms of what it addresses. So a lot of the details that they've included aren't relevant to most of the people reading. And then from an email best practice standpoint, it leaves you with an email that looks like a big long block of text. And I don't know about you all, but if I see an email that's just a big block of text in my inbox, I am not excited to read it. They also tend to be more focused on the product than on the needs of or benefits to the person that's reading it. Messages that connect really well with readers can build a sense that we understand them and their needs and their patience. And when we miss that mark, we're missing an opportunity to build really good trust with the people that we're trying to communicate with. And this also isn't just a vibe. This isn't just something that we think is true. 75 or marketers who personalize emails see a 75% increase in click-throughs. So personalization really works. We just have to go beyond adding someone's first name to the top of an email. Finally, we see a lot of campaigns that are fixed and not responsive. So many campaigns that we see are set up as kind of a basic timed drip, which can be a good start, but they don't necessarily line up to actual prospect needs or behaviors. For emails that aren't part of a drip, they are often sent on an ad hoc basis that's meant to fit more in with a marketing calendar than it is in with the actual prospect lifecycle. So we're sending emails in a pattern, and it's probably even a pattern that we set up on purpose because we had this idea of the customer experience that we wanted in mind. But because no two prospects are actually engaging the same way, we're missing out on responding to behaviors that could really use that kind of follow-up. Okay, so here is where we're going to ask folks to chime in a little bit. If you had a magic wand and could fix one thing about your current email strategy that you think would have a big impact, what would that be? And then are there other underlying issues that we haven't addressed that you think are important?
Yeah, please feel free to use the chat to input your question. Smarter segmentation.
Absolutely.
Personalize more accurately. Yes.
Stakeholders, better data is a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all really good call outs and absolutely something that we'll be talking about. I think these are really great.
Yeah, we're going to touch on those as we get through our framework. So I'm glad that these are all hitting and on the mark.
So typically email campaigns are kind of the things that we just said. They're overly broad. They're really focused on product features and specs. They don't have a lot of segmentation, which we've seen called out in the chat. They are usually not really following email best practices, and they rarely incorporate behavioral triggers. But on the other hand, when we look at companies who are usually seeing success or where sales is really working, what we see is data that's really well integrated and accessible, which allows really personalized communication. We see sales teams that are empowered to anticipate needs and communicate solutions that are relevant to your customers. And ultimately, not only does that make sales more effective and quicker, but it also drives product adoption, it drives trust and loyalty, which in turn all drives long-term revenue. So that's our ultimate goal. The goal in marketing is to get to the point of having a well-integrated omni-channel approach. So seamless integration of data, technology, and personalized communications across all of our touch points. And by nailing those things, what we deliver is predictive, proactive, equitable experience that drives adoption and product uptake with a measurable impact. And measurable impact is so important here, not only because it gives you a clear picture of opportunities to improve, sort of what's working and what's not, but it also enables you to show the distinct impact that marketing is having on the organization and on revenue. So that's something that you can take back to your organization. All right, so let's talk about our treatment plan. How are we going to get better? But before we jump into that, we have another question. So I would love for everyone to consider a recent success story from your top sales reps. So what was it that they did that was so key to making a difference in this approach? And you can drop these in the chat as well.
We have a list. We just want to see if it matches ours. Persistence, right? That's
Yes.
true. Multi-channel follow-ups. See a bunch of typing and matching our product solutions to their specific needs, follow-ups that feel like they know your business. Exactly. Yeah, those are very on point.
All right.
So the reveal of our list.
Yeah. So if you're building campaigns and they're not bringing the sales or the funnel movement or brand recognition that you're looking for, instead of trying to sort of tinker with them in a vacuum, let's look at what is really working. Let's take a look at your most effective sales reps and what they are doing that your emails aren't right now. So we know that reps leverage data in real time to inform strategy. They are out talking to people every day. They're able to recognize patterns of new concerns and pressures and things that prospects really care about. They are proactive and personalized conversations. So these reps are going in with a little bit of background, and it's enough to bring to those prospects things that they think would be important to them or helpful to them. And then they are adaptive to feedback and market forces. So when they hear something new, they're able to try out responses, see what works, have these conversations live, and learn from them. So how can we be a little more like these great sales reps? Your reps aren't just reading off a script. They're having conversations, they're listening, they are reacting. So we recommend that you start with auditing some call transcripts from your most effective reps. So listen for objections that come up and how your reps are reacting to them and start incorporating those into your campaigns. And as you do this over time, you'll be able to start picking out new objections, new concerns that are coming up. And that way you'll be able to get your communications out ahead of issues that are arising. Also, when your reps are having these conversations, they aren't speaking super formally. And your campaigns can model this too. So we recommend adjusting email copy to sound more human and a little less like a medical textbook. We recommend keeping copy short and saving deeper dives for landing pages. Studies show that we only get about 6 seconds of attention from a reader, probably at best. And another benefit of having these landing pages is that that's something that's an observable behavior for us. So we can't tell who's read what in an email, but we can see who has clicked through. So that gives us more information about our prospects. Okay, so your reps aren't waiting a week after a download, and your campaigns shouldn't either. 82% of consumers expect a response within 10 minutes. So you should not wait until the prospects have forgotten sort of what they were even looking for to be triggering that outreach. If you can react quickly with either the thing that they ask for or additional relevant information, and then you can follow up in a few days. We recommend identifying signals and using those to trigger outreach. Right now, 58% of marketers aren't activating based on real-time buyer signals. So So this is another way for you to sort of get out in front of that market. These signals can vary a lot from company to company, depending on what you're selling and who you're talking to. But some that stick out as good starting points are booth visits, visiting multiple pages on a particular topic or like a range of topics, downloading white papers, engaging on social media like LinkedIn, and then reviewing or asking for testimonials is a big one. There are probably others that make sense for your organization based on the data that you're able to collect and how you interact with the folks in your field. But these are sort of a starting point to get you going. And then finally, AI and automation. These are big, powerful tools, and we know they're at the top of the list for almost every company that we talk to right now. But especially in the healthcare space, we need to make sure there are still some guardrails. So you can create pre-approved content blocks that can be dynamically added into emails. So you can set them to populate based on the audience for different titles, geographies, practice sizes, maybe. Make sure that you have clear expiration dates on these, especially if we're trying to address timely issues. You want to make sure that you are very confident that you are always sending relevant things. So having a time limit on these and then revisiting them after is a great idea. And then similarly, using clear versioning logic so that you know exactly what is being sent at all times. This also has the benefit of being good for tracking metrics. So if you're doing testing, you'll know sort of which version is working and which maybe wasn't as well. We also recommend letting AI do some personalizing, but within a constrained environment. So for example, Salesforce Marketing Cloud has Einstein, which can dynamically populate those content blocks based on behaviors and signals. There's also other AI tools being built for healthcare to create comms models. So if you're interested in those, we can give you a list in the Q&A, or we can follow up offline on that. So this is where I'm going to hand you off to Kathy to talk about your prescription.
Thanks. So before we get into the prescription, I wanted to do story time with Kathy. And we're going to focus on a wonderful client of ours, ResMed. So this is a really great example because it brings to light a lot of the key elements that Tori just described around helping to drive campaign and email success. So those items that we listed, what your top sales reps are doing the best, like leveraging real-time data to inform strategy, proactive and personalized communications, and being adaptive to feedback and market forces. This case study really kind of brings it all together. So what exactly did ResMed do to achieve this? Well, they developed a brand new product. Their previous apnea sleeping devices were large. So they decided they wanted to develop a more compact and smaller version of their machine for convenience. And the product itself was amazing, but the problem was it wasn't selling. So that's when they came to us and asked for help. And so we decided to proactively choose a phased approach to this campaign. The initial campaign launch really was focused on involving a mechanism to provide feedback and reviews of the product. So when we did have people purchasing them, we really tried to understand what drove them to that purchase and what they liked about it and how they're using it. So after we reviewed that feedback, we noticed an overwhelming response around the ability to travel with this new machine because of its convenient size. So that was never in any of the messaging before. We really focused mostly on just the features of the product, not necessarily the benefits. And I'm sure that sounds like a familiar story across most of the email campaigns that you're seeing in and around healthcare and medtech. So that messaging was really kind of that point of differentiation that led us to launch our phase 2 campaign. And so we focused on those key benefits. So instead of selling the product based off of dimensions, for example, we sold the product based off of ease of travel and bringing the machine with you. So there was a lot of additional feedback as well. In addition to that travel feedback, it was that the device itself was not being approved by HSA, FSA. And so that actually enabled the ResMed team internally to push for its addition to the eligible product list. So again, to bring it back to kind of our key points, ResMed was able to leverage that real-time customer feedback data that informed our strategy moving forward. And it also enabled us to develop proactive and personalized communications across multiple channel points because we knew it was the travel group that we want to focus on. We were also able to adapt that feedback and approach based off of those market needs to ensure that the device in general was just more accessible to a larger audience. So you're probably thinking, well, that's a great story, Kathy. And all that you and Tori have shared is great, but where do I begin? And you're right, it's a little bit overwhelming. And I know one of the questions earlier was like, how do you do this? How do you start scaling across all the different segments? So we're going to get into that a little bit more. But first, we want to talk about the fact that, let's take it day by day. There's a ton of silos, red tape, legacy systems, and old ways of working that make it really hard to push innovation forward, especially in this space. So we want to make sure it's kind of a step-by-step approach. So what does that mean? Well, we have a few examples to kind of get you going and to start kind of rethinking your approach in the ways that, maybe in areas that you actually can control within the organization. I know sometimes it's hard. So let's take a page out of our top sales reps playbook and kind of focus on 3 key areas. The first step is really kind of adding a segment based on an external pressure. So your reps are already doing this. They're looking at real-time data. They want to see what's stressing out their audiences. They want to really pay attention to that. Maybe it's tariffs, maybe it's patient experience concerns, maybe it's affordability issues, right? So they figure out, who's the most impacted. Maybe it's certain company sizes or certain roles. And then they create targeted communications that speak directly to those concerns. So we can do the same thing with our email campaigns. We can segment based on what's keeping our key audiences up at night and just kind of start there. The next thing that we can do is really pull high value phrases from your top reps. As Tori said, talk to them, listen to the scripts, listen to what they're saying. This is another trick that they're already nailing. They know the language, they know what resonates, and they're hearing reactions firsthand too. So they're not going to keep repeating the same approach if it's not working. So learn from them. Go look at the recent scripts, find those phrases that address those real world pressures and get that strong response and try to weave that into your emails. It's a simple way to just make your campaigns feel more relevant and proactive, just like your sales reps do. And finally, choose one nurture, choose one journey, one email stream, and maybe try to add a trigger to that. So your best sales reps, they're very adaptive. They listen to feedback and those market shifts, and they typically adjust on the fly. So let's do that too. So pick one of those journeys or those nurture sequences where maybe just a small tweak could make a difference. So what behaviors can we observe that might signal a follow-up? Maybe we direct them to a certain call to action or a download, and we can add a triggered email to keep that conversation going depending on what the call to action was. So making it personalized, making it responsive, it really does show value quickly towards our key segments. So that all feels like a huge list, and I get it. So we thought we would make it even more fun and simple, which is here's what you can do in a week. Who doesn't love a days of the week list? So let's break it down. Your prescription, your 1 week plan. Let's make it manageable, and let's use these strategies to help us win in our email campaigns. So happy Monday. Today's the day you start talking to your top sales reps. So get on the phone with them, have a chat with them. They're already using that real-time data. Get to know what those pressure points are. Don't be afraid to ask. I bet you if you went to some of your top sales rep and asked them, what's been working for you lately, they'll tell you a ton of stories. Salespeople tend to like to tell stories and be chatty. So I think it would be a great coffee date to have. And their insights really are gold for shaping your email campaigns to be more proactive and personalized. So take advantage. Tuesday, start pulling your latest campaign data. I have this going over 2 days because sometimes it takes a little bit of time to pull the data. So ask someone on Monday to start pulling the data. On Tuesday, you should have it in your inbox. And this is really about getting that real-time data mindset that your reps are already using. So look how your campaigns are performing. How are the open rates, click-throughs, conversions? How are they stacking up against your own internal benchmarks, against industry benchmarks? how are you performing? Like, let's just start somewhere. So get a clear picture of where you're going, so you can adapt, and then just like your reps, you're adjusting based off of that feedback that you're getting from your data. On Wednesday, it's choose a campaign to focus on day. So now that you've got your data, just pick one existing campaign that maybe could use a little bit of love. It was set up a little while ago. It's been a long time since it's been looked at. And just make sure it's something with a decent volume so that there's enough room for testing. We always want to make sure that if we are testing within it, there's statistical significance in there. So you need kind of some good quality numbers in there. But this is where we want to also start thinking like a rep, right? Like your sales reps don't try to boil the ocean. They focus on what's moving the needle. So just focus on one campaign at a time, one small tweak at a time. It could make a big difference. Thursday is choose a segment day. So what segment could have the most growth potential? So they're already looking at what segments are facing which external pressures like affordability and that patient experience concern. So let's kind of do the same thing. Let's look at your audience and think, what segment can we actually address a real pain point on? And maybe it's specific to a company size or a specific role that we're feeling is, feeling the heat, so to speak, of today's pressures. So narrow in on that group. Maybe we can create some personalized communications that are going to hit the hardest for those people. And then Friday, it's end of week. So it's time to kind of wrap up, take in what you've learned throughout the week. What did your reps tell you? What is your data telling you? And how do we now adjust our messaging to reflect that? So maybe your reps shared a phrase that's been getting great reactions. Try to work that into your email copy. But here's the trick. We don't want to add it in addition to all the things that you already have in your email. We want to make sure that the email in and itself is optimized so it has 1 to 2 key messages within the email max. Your reps know how to cut through the noise with clear, targeted communications. They don't start going off on tangents and go into long dialogues necessarily. So let's try to do the same thing here. Let's try to do the same thing for your email campaigns. So that's your week. Talk to your reps, pull your data, pick a campaign, choose a segment, refine your message. It's all about leveraging that real-time data, being proactive, being personalized, and adapting as you go. So by Friday, you'll have a campaign that's already starting to feel a little bit more focused and a little bit more impactful. So now I'm sure you're thinking, well, that's 1 week. What do I do after week 1? Well, that's a great question. So now that we've got our week 1 quick wins down, this is a really great opportunity to get some early momentum. But we kind of need a solid framework for the long haul, especially in healthcare with all the silos and omni-channel pressures that we know you guys are facing. So here's kind of, what comes after week 1, which is a roadmap to omni-channel success. So first and foremost, we want to dive into your customer experience. We want to run a channel audit. We want to map the journey and pinpoint pain points using customer insights so that you really know where your starting line is. Like really kind of be honest with yourself with where you are today. Next is really to determine where you want to be. So this is where we get to be proactive. We want to truly understand our audience's needs. We want to visualize that ideal journey, that customer experience blueprint, and planning that journey out, identifying what those key moments and key barriers are so we can strategize our campaigns to tackle those. And simplifying messages for our HCPs because, they're busy. So we want to keep it straightforward and simple. To Tori's point, 6 seconds is all the time we have. So we got to be careful with that and apply some best practices when it comes to content and design with our emails. And then finally, I'm a huge believer in never set and forget. As we said at the beginning, that's one of the problems is most people set and forgot it. So we don't want to do that. We want to commit to learning as we go. We need to be ready to adapt to any kind of feedback we receive, whether it's action or inaction. So setting up testing and learn strategies, a testing plan, a feedback loop, And don't fall under the guise that doing a subject line test once in a while is a testing strategy. That does not work. Tori is a big testing advocate. She's my testing guru, and she will advocate for at least a 6 to 12 month plan for testing. So if you're not planning that way, you're missing huge opportunities. So make sure you think about testing in that way. So we've got a roadmap to omni-channel success. But I wanted to take a step back for a second because we did define it earlier. Tori shared that definition, but I wanted to break it down a little bit more about what it actually means. So, omni-channel is kind of like what we used to do back in the day where we call customer relationship management, CRM. It's really about right customer, right channel, right time with the right message. So it's essentially the same thing. It's just elevated now because of all of the tech and capabilities that are available to you. So when we're talking about reaching the right customer, it's about using that real-time data, understanding your audience, having those 360-degree views, and combining demographics and their behaviors to identify those most engaged and those that have the most sales potential. Most campaigns are not behaviorally triggered. So we really need to think about that and really understand there is a lot of value that their actions and inactions are giving you in terms of data. So we need to leverage that wherever possible. The second is really delivering through the right channel. So your sales reps, for example, know when to pick up the phone versus sending an email versus sending a text. They curate based off of what they know works for whichever customer or account that they have. So we need to do the same thing across all of our digital channels and making sure that we're meeting our audiences where they're at. The third is timing. So using triggers and intent signals to decide the right moment to engage instead of these marketing push messages, again, behaviorally triggered messages based off of the actions of that people are taking within your campaigns is really critical. And then finally, right message and solution. So your reps are proactive and they're personalized. So, they're constantly tailoring their pitch to the needs and the journey stage that their customers are at or wherever they are within the funnel. So omnichannel does the same. We want to ensure that every email, call, every single touch point feels relevant and valuable, whether it's online or offline. And that's what true omnichannel looks like, the right customer, channel, time, and message all working together seamlessly. But the question is, how do you know where you stand on this journey? Because to Tori's earlier point as well, we can't just add a first name to an email and call it personalized. So there is a maturity level that we need to consider when it comes to omni-channel and personalization. So luckily, we have a handy omni-channel maturity model that helps to kind of address some of this and helps to kind of paint the picture of where you might be. So the thing about omnichannel is that it needs to be a company-wide initiative. That's why people and process, for example, is so integral in your maturity standing from an omnichannel perspective, because just because one group within the org decides they want to be omnichannel doesn't mean it'll actually happen. It needs to be a coordinated effort across all multiple stakeholders and team and puts the customer experience first. So this maturity scale is really here to help you assess your readiness across 4 key areas. That's data, technology, marketing strategy, and people and process, so you can see where you can fit and see where you can grow. So if you're at the foundational level, for example, you're probably dealing with siloed data like basic HCP profiles with no integration. You're probably limited to a few channels like email. Your campaigns tend to be a bit generic, and your teams are disconnected with manual processes. And that's okay. That's a starting point, but just knowing where you are, that's important. If you're in the developing stage, for example, you've got some integration going like behavioral data and basic governance, plus initial digital channels like maybe an HCP portal. But you're starting to kind of personalize, and your teams are forming some standard processes in place. So this continues to evolve as you ideally aim to reach at the optimized level, which means that you're at the top. You have real-time HCP insights with ethical AI. You have AI-driven tech at a global scale. You have predictive and proactive campaigns, and you're fully aligned with teams, and you have optimized processes, and you're driving efficiency gains and rapidly scaling. So let's take a minute to think, as you look at your own situation, at your own organization, where do you think you fit? Maybe you're developing in data, but you're foundational in tech, and that's totally fine. This isn't about being perfect. It's about knowing where to focus next so you can start building toward that seamless omni-channel experience we talked about. So start with one area like integrating your data or aligning your teams, and then just take it step by step. So we've got our 1 week plan. You've assessed your omni-channel readiness, and now it's time to bring it all together with a blueprint for long-term success. So this is how you'll plan for tomorrow: a comprehensive framework to align strategy, people, process, tech, ops, all for scalable, compliant HCP engagement in the medtech and healthcare space. So really, we want to start, number one, with strategy, defining clear objectives that tie back to your brand and commercial goals. Think about measurable outcomes that, for example, like improved HCP engagement rates. How do we make sure we're all aligned with those objectives and those goals across the org so that we're all shooting towards the same goals? We also want to map out those HCP journeys and key moments of influence and decide on your channels and content types and set those engagement triggers, and then establish, of course, governance to keep your omni-channel execution consistent and compliant, which we know is very important. Next up, we want to focus on people and process. We really need alignment across your cross-functional teams. That includes marketing, sales, operations, IT, data, analytics, all of them. And we need to empower them with training and playbooks for omni-channel orchestration. We want to standardize workflows from planning to deployment so everyone's on the same page and you're not tripping over silos. And finally, we want to address technology, data, and operations. We need to activate key platforms like a CDP, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, Marketo, or some CRM tool to power your campaigns. We need to standardize those workflows. We need to align internal as well as external partners, including your agency partners, for seamless execution, and create that omni-channel operating model that fits your brand's maturities. So whether you're just developing or pushing towards advanced, you need to kind of scale along with your progress. So this blueprint really pulls together everything we've covered, starting small, building a roadmap, and knowing where you stand on the maturity scale. It's your guide to kind of tackling the complexity, and we know it's complex, of the medtech marketing space and driving those real sustainable results that you're looking for. I'm going to take a breath now, and I am going to open it up to Q&A because we have covered a lot. So let's take this time to maybe go through some immediate questions you have. And again, please use the chat function to put in your question. And I will say before we get into it, just like any doctor's visit, I always think of questions after the visit is over. So if that happens to you, we will have our information at the end of this presentation, and there will be a follow-up. So, feel free to contact Tori or myself with any of your questions, and we can help you address them as you need. All right, so let's go to the questions. All right. Come on, we know you have burning questions, you guys. Let's go. So I know one of the questions earlier, and I mentioned, how do you scale across all the different segments, and that's just it. It's start with the specific segments that you feel will drive the most lift for you, and then kind of grow and learn from there. I'm a huge believer in starting small and growing. So really just making sure that you focus on kind of the quick wins and the bigger lifts in terms of where you'll see results, and then we kind of we go from there. So one of the questions is, how do you align cross-functional teams to make progress? And then another question is, how do I get the data I need for personalization? It's so hard to get IT to prioritize it. Okay, good question. So Aligning cross-functional teams to make progress. Well, a lot of the times, depending on the size of your organization, but we often will recommend, especially if it ends up being kind of if at an organizational level, everyone agrees this is the plan. It's in your financial report. Like you're all expected to be omni-channel and ever present. We truly recommend really thinking about a center of excellence around the customer experience. We've seen a lot of organizations as well adjust even their marketing teams to be less about product specific and more about life stage specific. So the teams then focus on onboarding, welcome, acquisition versus ongoing engagement, and that sort of thing. So just organizing your teams that way, because at the core, you need to understand that just because one team is talking to one customer at one point and another team is talking to the same customer at that point, that customer expects the same experience, because from their perspective, they don't care about your silos and different products. That you're one brand, you're one experience. So really kind of thinking about it from that perspective is really important. And then the question around how do I get the data I need for personalization? It's so hard to get IT to prioritize it. Agreed. So
Yeah.
if you're struggling getting IT to work with you on the data piece, I would also say, like, you can start today and start pulling in the data that you're looking for. Like start with your campaigns and start pulling in kind of that indirect profiling information that you can pull just from your email campaigns. There's so many cues that come just from that. And if you don't have anything else available to you, I think that's a great starting point to just kind of take things under your control. But ultimately, it is important to get IT on board. So I would highly recommend, talk to them. They have their own objectives, and I get that. But if we start to kind of collaborate with them and understand what their needs are and work with them and have those conversations, really think about how can we get both groups the same amount of skin in the game, make their objectives the same objectives as your objectives in a way. So how do we match those and make sure that they're organized from that perspective? All right. You mentioned understanding our buyers better. How can I start learning more about what our potential customers are really interested in? We use Marketo. I don't know, Tori, do you want to maybe take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I like this one. If I were thinking about this one, I would probably start by looking at some current customers, especially like people that have converted recently, and see what you can dig into about what worked on them. What web pages did they look at? What emails did they answer? Where did they click through? And maybe that's the kind of information that you can start pushing more of, or push information related to that to try and see if that would get you some traction.
Awesome. Another one is the insight that sales teams are a great source of info about customer pain points, buying signals, et cetera. In your view, why don't more marketers leverage these insights to feed campaign strategy? What are the blockers to doing this more frequently, specifically regular Q&A combos? I mean, yeah, the sales and marketing, it's a love. I'm not going to say love hate. Hate is a strong. It's a love different objectives kind of relationship. So I know that sometimes there's some contention. And again, I mean, if we all kind of have, push pull, if we all have, similar objectives at the end of the day. And that's why KPIs are really important, and making sure that we're all aligned as an organization. Because if we can feed into that and make sure that, our KPIs all fall under the business objectives that the business has set, then I think I think that just helps open up the opportunity to collaborate more. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's just like most teams just to kind of stick within themselves. I don't know how many organizations we talk to that even within marketing, they don't talk to each other, like the different silos, the different product teams, they're all testing the same thing and they don't even know it. So it's just really opening up the lines of communication, and just that cross collaboration is really key. And for those of us facing significant budget rollbacks, what's one thing we can manually do to make our emails feel a bit more personal to the people receiving them? That's a good question. Tori, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I would take a look at who's in your audience and see where you can start doing some segmenting. So maybe it's the size of the companies that you're talking to, or maybe it's individual roles of different people within that audience, and start breaking those up and doing a little bit more personalization to those groups. That is something that I think you can do relatively manually. It may take some time and some digging, but it's an easy way to get started with doing some segmentation and personalization.
Yeah, and to another point, though, the weekly plan could be a way to solve for that too. So I
Mhm.
agree. That's a good way to start. All right, because we're kind of short on time now, let's move on. But those were great questions. So how can we help? So if you're feeling like you're ready for some change and would love some of our help, we have two options for your consideration that we'd be happy to provide. The first is really looking at a specific campaign in and itself and really understanding how it's performing. So if you share with us maybe some of the metrics and the emails themselves, we can take a look at providing an analysis of key findings and recommendations for optimization. This also happens to be one of your day of the week tasks, so we can just help you take that right off your plate. And then the second approach is, if you're feeling confident that from a campaign content creative level you're good, but a question keeps coming up because we know this is also a point of contention, is like how much is too much and how much is too little. If you want to take a look at just kind of a map of all the touch points that you have and kind of cross reference it against best practice, against a typical life cycle and life stage, we can make recommendations around cadences and triggers. And then we can also help identify maybe which campaigns have the most opportunity for growth, or which areas within the life stage or life cycle have the most opportunities for growth, which also happens to be one of your days of the week tasks. So hopefully we can help there. And like I said, here's our information for Tori and myself. So please don't be a stranger, reach out. Thank you everyone for your time. I know it can be difficult to carve out up to an hour within your busy days. So we appreciate your attendance and we hope we provided some valuable insights that you can take away to maybe some of your next meetings. And as a reminder, a link to this recording will be sent to you so you can reference it back as needed. And, outside of the email addresses, feel free to look Tori and I up on LinkedIn too and add us. But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and keep an eye out for more webinars from us in the coming weeks.
Thanks, everyone.